So remember, you don't go straight to the credit bureau. You go to this website, you log in using Social Security number and birth date, all of which is safe to provide because you have initiated the contact. They have that information already. They're just authenticating who you say you are. And once you're in, you'll ask to see a free copy of your credit report, and they'll ask you to choose a credit bureau. So that could be Experian, Equifax, or TransUnion. Doesn't matter which one you pick. Look at one of them, come back 4 months later, look at the next one, come back 4 months later, look at the next one, 4 months later, start over. So that way you're keeping a regular eye on your credit. Now that's a lot to ask. It takes a lot of discipline to do that, and most people don't do that. If you can do it once a year, you'll be better off than most people. Ideally, do it 3 times a year, but if you can get a look at one of those reports once a year, you'll still be in good shape, and you'll be catching identity theft. If it happens to you, you'll be catching it in a relatively short time so that you can make the dispute process easier. So that's the way it works on checking your free credit report. You do not get a copy of your credit score when you do this. Your credit score is a 3-digit number that measures how good a credit risk you are, and that runs anywhere from 300 to 850 in terms of the number. The price is usually $5 to $10. But between 300 and 850, obviously the higher the better. Pretty much anything over 720 or so is considered an excellent credit score, even though the max is 850. Okay. What else on credit reports? There are no joint credit reports. So if you're married, you and your spouse would each have a credit report, even though there may be joint accounts that end up on both of your credit reports. And say again? Yeah, that you would each have one? Yes. So there's not any joint credit report. And then if you have kids, your kids should not have a credit report. And it's not a bad idea every, maybe not as often as you check your own, but every year or two, just run your kid's Social Security number and birth date, and if the answer comes back, there is no credit report for this person, that's good. That's what you want to hear, all right? If there is, then there may be a problem. There may be identity theft. And when you think about it, children can be the ideal victims of identity theft because they have no bad credit history, so there's no record of them anywhere as having been a bad credit risk, and it may be years and years before the theft is detected. Most parents are not checking their kids' credit reports on a regular basis. So if you steal the identity of a 10-year-old, it may be 8 years before that person is ever using credit and anyone is ever pulling up that person's name for a credit report. So not a bad idea once in a while to check the kids as well. Okay, so questions about credit reports? Okay, question about Social Security number?
She was writing bad checks. She's a college student at Lindenwood.
Mm-hmm.
They threw her in jail because her name and Social Security number showed that she was writing bad checks, and that wasn't true.
Was it someone with the same name who was doing it?
That's what they thought, yeah.
Okay.
But it was still under her Social Security number.
That does happen. I mean, there are I'd say that's rare, but you may have some stories similar to that working at the police department.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, people that can happen accidentally. There's also what we call criminal identity theft, and it's all criminal. It's all a crime. But there's criminal identity theft where people use someone else's identity in order to commit a crime and get away with it. It could be as small as giving the wrong person's driver's license and information to a police officer who pulls you over for speeding. Then the ticket hits their record. There's also medical identity theft where someone takes your insurance information and goes and gets treatment under your plan, and then it shows up on your benefits. So these things do happen. There are different variations of identity theft. I like to say the big two are new account fraud and existing account fraud, but there are other types as well, and criminal is one of them. So that can happen. What other questions on credit reports?
With the freeze on your credit report, do you know the length of time that lasts now?
Yes, and I'll talk about that in just a second. I'll get into the details. That is permanent, by the way, the freeze. On credit scores, as I said, the number usually ranges from 300 to 850. Interesting to note that it's not just lenders and credit card companies that are pulling your credit scores now. Insurance companies, car and homeowners insurance, will look at those credit scores and use them in considering in determining your rates. So they can't deny you insurance based on if you have bad credit, but they can charge you a higher rate if you have bad credit. It's a very controversial practice, because people who have poor credit may pay a higher rate on car insurance even though they have a clean record. So it's not a real popular practice, but the insurance companies claim that credit score is a predictor of likelihood of filing a claim.
But isn't that the better way to do it, so that I don't pay for everybody else's errors and mistakes and driving? Doesn't that keep my rate lower? You know what I mean?
Well, the example I was giving is someone who has bad credit but a good driving record might have to pay higher rates. So it could, yeah, some people see it as unfair because of that. But on the other hand, they claim to have data that shows that people with lower credit scores file more claims than people with higher credit scores. And you know, insurance rates are supposed to be set based on the risk of that company having to pay claims. So that's the argument that they make.
My insurance company raised our rates just because of checks on our credit status, not our credit report or score, but just a lot of people had checked into it. We were refinancing our home.
That probably lowered your score, though.
And, yeah,
those checks. Yeah.
So yeah, just by refinancing and doing some of those things, our auto insurance went up.
Yeah, not because you had failed to pay any bills, but
No.
because you had been applying for credit.
So by
Yeah.
calling that number, that would prevent those other people from doing that, is that right?
No, no. Tell me, which number do you mean and which people do you mean?
Pre-approved credit card type.
No, what that's going to, no. When credit card companies send you these unsolicited offers, those have no effect on your credit, okay? It's when you are out applying for credit, that can have a downward effect on your score temporarily during the time that you're applying in the application process. So if you get 100 unsolicited offers for pre-approved credit in your mailbox, that will have no effect on your score. But if you're shopping for a loan and you apply for a loan at this lender and then at this one, and then you apply for a credit card shortly after that, and then you're looking at a mortgage at the same time and applying for that, all of those inquiries signal to the formula that you could be in higher debt soon. So your score comes down a bit because of that during the time that you're applying.
That should be legal.
So that's probably what happened there. With your credit score, there are basically 5 factors that go into it, and the biggest one, of course, is how good are you at paying your bills on time. That's your bill payment history. And I'm going to see if I can remember them off the top of my head. The types of credit that you have in use, meaning do you have mortgages, do you have car loans, do you have credit cards, how long have you been in business with those creditors, those particular creditors, how long a relationship do you have with them, the longer the better, the more it helps your score. Any new applications for credit if you've been applying, and the amount of debt that you have. So there are 5 factors, and of course the biggest factor, like 35% of your score, is your bill payment history. So as you would expect, that would have the highest effect. Let's see, other questions about credit? Okay, let's move on to freezing your credit report. And this, as I said, is something we've only been able to do in Missouri for about 2 years. We can put a security freeze on our credit report, and what that does is it blocks our credit report from the view of lenders. So that means lenders are going to deny any application for new credit that's made in our name.
Just from lenders, is it blocked from anybody?
Everybody, yeah.
Okay.
It's blocked from lender. Anybody that wants to establish credit in your name would not be able to see your credit score.
How about if you send a resume out, somebody wants to check your credit score?
You probably have to lift it. You probably have to lift this freeze. Yeah, and I'll explain that in a second.
Okay, thanks.
The question was, what if an employer was going to try to pull your credit and it was frozen? They would probably have trouble too, so you'd have to get this lifted. As I said, landlords, insurance companies, employers, lenders, all of them look at credit regularly. Many of them do. So it's important to know this has an effect on the rest of your life and not just your ability to borrow money. But when you place a security freeze on your report, it means that basically any new applications in your name will be denied. So that's a way to prevent new account fraud. And the way it works is you go to these 3 credit bureaus, the same ones we've been talking about, Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion, and you place a security freeze on your report. It costs $5. Missouri law says it cannot cost more than that. It costs $5, one-time fee, and then your credit is frozen forever unless you tell them to lift it. So why would you want to lift it? Well, of course, if you want to use your credit, you would need to lift it so that lenders and others can pull your file and decide whether or not to approve you.